All right, good afternoon, everyone. For those who may not know me, I'm Stephanie Tremblay, and I'll be doing the noon briefing today. So welcome to the noon briefing. In a short while, we will be joined by our guest, Amy Pope, who's the Director General of the International Organization for Migration, and she will brief you virtually on her visit to Haiti earlier this week. Moving on to the Deputy Secretary-General, Amina Mohammed is in Hanoi, Vietnam today to participate in the Partnership for Growth Summit and to chair the annual retreat of UN resident coordinators from Asia and the Pacific. In her remarks at the opening session of the summit, Ms. Mohammed underlined the need to strengthen partnerships and to scale up investments in climate solutions as a key entry point to advance countries' sustainable development goals transitions. Ms. Mohammed also met with the Minister of Agriculture and Environment, Mr. Đức Duy. They discussed Vietnam's transition to a low-carbon energy system and progress on its food system pathways. On the margins of the summit, she also met with Abiy Ahmed, the Prime Minister of Ethiopia. And at the Green One UN House in Hanoi, Ms. Mohammed met the UN country team to discuss how to further strengthen the UN's impact in Vietnam and to sustain momentum on the SDGs. She also met with youth. This morning, the Security Council members met for a briefing on South Sudan. The head of the UN mission in South Sudan, Nicholas Haysom, told the Council members that the revitalized peace agreement remains the only viable framework to break the cycle of violence in South Sudan. He added that UNMISS is engaged in intensive diplomatic efforts to broker a peaceful solution to the current crisis alongside many stakeholders, including the African Union and the Security Council itself. For her part, the Director of Operations and Advocacy at OCHA, Edem Wasornu, focused on the rapidly escalating violence and its impact on men, women, and children. This year, she said 9.3 million South Sudanese, that is 3/4 of the population, require some form of humanitarian assistance, adding that children make up half of this total. For South Sudan, this year's Humanitarian Needs and Response Plan requires $1.7 billion to support close to 5.4 million people. Their full remarks were shared with you. And the Security Council will reconvene at 3 p.m. this afternoon for a session on the Great Lakes region. The Special Envoy for the Great Lakes region, Wang Xia, as well as UNICEF's Executive Director, Catherine Russell, are scheduled to brief on our behalf. We will share their remarks as soon as we get them. And we wanted to welcome the consensus achieved a few hours ago on a draft pandemic agreement reached in Geneva after more than 3 years of intensive negotiations. Member states of the World Health Organization took a major step forward in efforts to make the world safer from pandemics by forging the draft agreement for consideration at the upcoming World Health Assembly in May. The proposal aims to strengthen global collaboration on prevention, preparedness, and response to future pandemic threats. And now, turning to Sudan, we remain gravely concerned by the escalating violence and deteriorating humanitarian situation in and around El Fasher, the capital of North Darfur State. Our partners on the ground have provided deeply disturbing reports following the reported takeover of Zamzam displacement camp by armed groups. Civilians, including humanitarian workers, are reportedly being prevented from leaving, and survivors have spoken of killing, sexual violence, and also of the burning of homes. Access constraints, a critical fuel shortage, and a volatile security environment are severely disrupting humanitarian operations in El Fasher. Health services and water treatment have been particularly impacted. Meanwhile, in Khartoum State, drone attacks on April 14th on power infrastructure have left large parts of the districts of Badda, Karari, and Omdurman without electricity or clean water. Once again, we call on all parties to the conflict to protect civilians and to facilitate humanitarian access. We also urge increased international support to ensure that the delivery of essential aid to the most vulnerable people in Sudan continues. And we were asked yesterday, I believe, by Edie about the London Conference on Sudan, and I can tell you that we welcome the convening of the conference like we did yesterday, and all efforts to mobilize international engagement in support of peace, the protection of civilians, and humanitarian access in the country. We also welcome the significant amounts of funding announced during the conference, and as the Secretary-General has said many times, we must keep our focus on finding an end to this brutal conflict. Thank you. Now, turning to the situation in Gaza, the Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs reports that hostilities across the Gaza Strip continue to take a devastating toll on civilians, causing further death, displacement, and destruction of critical infrastructure. Our humanitarian partners estimate that since March 18th, about 500,000 people have been newly displaced or uprooted once more. This is in addition to the hundreds of thousands of people repeatedly displaced prior to the ceasefire. Our humanitarian colleagues tell us that tents are no longer available for distribution across Gaza. In the town of Bani Suhaila in Khan Yunis Governorate, for example, families who had recently been displaced received only modest quantities of blankets and tarpaulins. Last week, OCHA visited displacement sites in Khan Yunis. Most of the people there are living in overcrowded shelters and spoke about the lack of shelter, food, water, and medicine. Meanwhile, our humanitarian partners report a rise in acute malnutrition in the Strip. In March, the number of children who received supplementary feeding decreased by more than 2/3, according to our partners. Additionally, access constraints hinder the ability to resupply the hospitals with medical stocks, putting more patients at risk. Humanitarians are finding it increasingly difficult to operate as no aid has entered Gaza for now. We're now in the 7th week of this, and as military operations expand. Meanwhile, OCHA tells us that Israeli authorities continue to deny planned coordinated mission. Today, only 2 out of 6 planned humanitarian movements that were coordinated with the Israeli authorities were facilitated. The remaining 4 were denied, including one mission to retrieve fuel from Rafah, which, as you can imagine, is urgently needed. Despite access restrictions and insecurity, aid organizations continue to try to assist the most vulnerable. Every day, community kitchens prepare more than 1 million meals for vulnerable people across Gaza. But these quantities are hardly sufficient, as most of the 2.1 million people there rely on humanitarian aid to access food. And just a reminder that under international humanitarian law, civilians, including aid workers and medical staff, as well as their facilities, must be respected and protected, and the essential needs of civilians must be met. Now, turning to the Democratic Republic of the Congo, our humanitarian colleagues report that violence in the country's east continues to harm civilians there. In North Kivu province, civil society sources report that armed groups killed at least 9 civilians in attacks on a number of villages in Beni territory, and that took place between the 10th and the 14th of April. Despite the insecurity, relief efforts continue. On Monday, local health authorities provided medical supplies to the Kibua General Hospital, and that is in Walikale territory. The hospital had been looted in early April by armed groups, disrupting access to health care for nearly 130,000 people. And in the province of Ituri, our partners report that 6,000 people have fled their homes in Mahagi territory following attacks by armed groups on April 12th. These people urgently need food, shelter, and medical care. Now, in Tanganyika province, health officials have warned of a surge in measles cases and deaths among children. So far this year, health authorities have reported 900 cases and 21 deaths, and officials believe the true toll could be higher. We and our partners have helped local authorities to deploy a rapid response team to affected areas, as well as supported outreach and awareness-raising efforts. And now in Iraq, we have some positive news. Yazidi land ownership has been officially recognized, and in a ceremony that took place in Sinjar this week, title deeds were distributed to Yazidi residents. The special representative of the Secretary-General for Iraq, Mohammed Al-Hassan, said that by officially recognizing their land rights and waiving all associated burden costs, we are reaffirming the joint commitment of the UN and Iraq to the Yazidi people and their rightful place in Iraq's future. Our colleagues, just to flag that our colleagues at UN Habitat have been working and advancing housing, land, and property rights for vulnerable communities there. And there's more online about this. And now I want to flag a report by the UN Trade and Development in Geneva. The report says that global growth is projected to slow to 2.3% this year, placing the world economy on a recessionary path. The report cites mounting threats, including trade policy shocks, financial volatility, and a surge in uncertainty that risk derailing the global outlook. The slowdown will affect all nations, but UNCTAD remains concerned about developing countries and especially the most vulnerable economies. Many low-income countries face a perfect storm of worsening external financial conditions, unsustainable debt, and weakening domestic growth, the report says. UNCTAD is urging dialogue and negotiation alongside stronger regional and global policy coordination, building on existing trade and economic ties. So the full report is online. And now, briefings tomorrow. So tomorrow at 12:30, Ambassador Tarek Al-Banai, the permanent representative of Kuwait to the UN and chair of the intergovernmental negotiations on the question of equitable representation on an increase in the membership of the Security Council and other matters related to the Council, will be here to speak to you about the status of the negotiations taking place in the General Assembly. Then, immediately after this briefing, there will be a briefing by Guilherme Canela de Souza Godoy, Director of UNESCO's Division for Digital Inclusion and Policies and Digital Transformation. He will brief you virtually on UNESCO's Memory of the World Register. So this is all tomorrow, and as you can imagine, our own noon briefing will aim to start at 12 p.m. sharp. And finally, I have a quiz. Very happy to have a quiz for you. So this country is the 4th largest tea producer in the world.
Sri Lanka?
Yes?
Oh.
You see, I thought I would have to use the other hands. So yes, we say thank you to our friends in Colombo for their full payment to the regular budget. And we now have 93 fully paid up member states. And she gets the first question. Do you have a question? All right, Deji, go ahead.
Thank you. My first question would be who will brief us from the spokesperson's office tomorrow?
It will be the other staff.
Oh, so 12 sharp? Okay.
Good
Anyway, my question first, the Human Rights Council just decided to extend the mandate of the Special Rapporteur on the situation of human rights in the Palestinian territories, Ms. Francisca Albanese, which draws condemnation from United States. In that condemnation, it says it shows that UN wait a moment, let me just find the exact words. It made clear that United Nations tolerates anti-Semitic hatred, bias against Israel, and the legitimization of terrorism. Your response?
As you know, the Secretary General, for whom I'm speaking on behalf of, has no decision-making power in these appointments. It all belongs to the Human Rights Council. So as such, it's a decision of the Human Rights Council.
But does the UN tolerate anti-Semitism?
I think you know the answer to that question. No.
Okay, so on Gaza, Israeli Defense Minister Mr. Katz said that Israel will not allow any humanitarian aid entering Gaza. He said that there's no preparation are being made to bring supplies into the strip, and the blockade was a way of putting pressure on Hamas. Is that a recognition? Is that an admission that Israel is now saying that we're weaponizing our humanitarian aid as a weapon?
I think, as we've said several times, we keep reiterating that humanitarian aid delivery arrangements must respect fully the humanitarian principles. And this is how we operate in Gaza and elsewhere around the world. And these principles are humanity, impartiality, independence, neutrality. So we really stick to these principles. And, I can use this opportunity to just reiterate that we call once again for the immediate restoration of the ceasefire. I think the notes that we read every day that talk about, even the note that I read just now that stated how food is running low, how medicine is running low, how every supplies essentially that help support human life and dignity in Gaza are running low. It's essential for us to keep pushing for the restoration of the ceasefire, for the immediate and unconditional release of all hostages. And we call, of course, once again, for unimpeded humanitarian access throughout the Gaza Strip.
May I have a follow-up?
You can have a follow-up.
Okay, so I'm just wondering, when I heard all those, what's the latest contact from the UN officials to at least a ministerial level officials of Israel? Is there any communication on that level now? Or
as you know, we have colleagues who are on the ground who have contacts.
No. I mean for at least with ministers, like for example, the Minister of Defense or Minister of Foreign Affairs of Israel.
So our colleagues who are on the ground, they do have contacts at various level on a daily basis.
And you convey the message to them?
I think these messages are conveyed pretty clearly. Yes. Yes. Yes, NPR.
Thank you. I have a question in regard to UNRWA. We know last year that the Biden administration, even with, had stopped making voluntary contributions. I was wondering, what is the status of UNRWA's budget these days, and who has stepped in to pick up the slack?
I don't have an update on the exact numbers with you right now, but I think, contributions continue to come in from various sources. I believe that all their funding is available online, but I can get more granularity for you on this. Yes, and then Stefano.
Hi, my name is Ray. So I'm with 21st Century Business Herald, Guangdong, China. Hi, Stephanie. It's my first day here.
Welcome.
So you just mentioned that the economic growth rate would drop down to 2.3%, which would put the world into probably a borderline recession. At the same time, U.S. President Donald Trump has framed tariff as a battle over access to American consumers. So does the UN view this approach as damaging to global economic cooperation, especially efforts to create a more balanced consumption and production patterns between developed and developing countries?
I think, let me just reiterate what the Secretary General has said on this topic many times. He said that nobody wins in trade wars. And, one other thing that was important in the note and in the report by UNCTAD is that they really highlight how the developing world is always paying a higher price for this. Yes, Stefano?
Thank you very much. Two questions. First, yesterday was asked to Stefan about the document that was leaked of the State Department where there are up to 90% cuts from the U.S. to the United States, to United Nations. Now, my question regarding to this is, we know that this administration is cutting everywhere, okay? But university, other departments trying, whoever is subjected to cuts, trying to deal with the administration to prevent at least part of those cuts. So what the UN is doing now that the documents are out there, what is actually the Secretary General doing? He doesn't talk to the President Trump. So what the UN is doing to try to prevent those cuts?
So once again, I think Stefan answered that question yesterday in unequivocal terms, that that we, and I'm sure you will understand, we will not comment on what appears to be a leaked memo that discusses internal deliberations at the UN. On the humanitarian side and on the UN, of course, the UN continues, and you hear us every day talking about the appeals for humanitarian assistance, and all of that work continues.
At least, just a quick follow-up. There is an attempt by the Secretary General to reach directly the President Trump on this issue. Has been there an attempt?
Yeah. There is, as Stefan has said, when there's something to report on this, we will let you know. I don't have any more comments on this.
Then is that completely another subject. A few weeks ago, I asked Stefan about the case of Dr. Oleg Maltsev. He's a researcher in Odessa in Ukraine that was arrested months ago. He told me basically later, he answered me, said that the UN doesn't have information about it. Now, just yesterday, his lawyer, this lawyer, their name is Olga Panchenko, is a civil rights lawyer. She has been arrested while she actually taking care of it in Odessa. So the situation looks like that in Ukraine at the moment, against the constitution, they even arrest lawyers that trying to defend people that are not yet on trial, put it there in prison for months. So I understand maybe you don't know the case. You cannot know all the cases. But in general terms, is the UN aware that even lawyers in this moment in Ukraine, in the city of Odessa, are picked up by the police while they're trying to defend their client?
I unfortunately do not have specific information about this. And if there are no further questions, we have Amy Pope waiting for us online. So if you agree, let's try to bring her on the screen. Very good. Hi.